Well, hello. It's time to continue our series on the railway lines envisioned by the Railway London Plan Committee of 1944. These were intended to assist in the rebuilding and growth of London following the Second World War, but they were never actually built for various reasons, yada yada yada. We're now up to Route 7 of the 13 lines planned, and this is something rather unique. All the lines were unique, but this was more unique than the others. It was a dedicated freight line, which might make it the uniquest of all. Certainly I can't think of a uniquer one. Like Route 6, it would have begun at Loughborough Junction in South London, then run in a tunnel through Blackfriars and Holborn. Then it would have connected with the city-widened lines at Farringdon, which was the end of the route. The report doesn't specify, but I assume it would have reused Snow Hill Tunnel, which at the time was disused. The report does specify that the northern destinations for freight trains would have been Brent and Firm Park Yards, and in the south, Hither Green, Herne Hill, Bricklayers Arms, and Battersea. The report raises a few obvious questions. It doesn't actually state which stations were en route. Assuming it followed the approximate route of the current Thameslink line, which it would appear to, there would have been some major industries along the way. It would have gone past Bankside Power Station and the Pool of London. It would also have gone very near to Mount Pleasant Sorting Office and Smithfield Market. Would trains have served any of those, or was it just going to run straight through without stopping? In short, were there any stations? The earlier County of London plan of 1943 imagined a sort of circle line for freight following the route of the already existing Circle Line. This isn't present in the committee report of 1946 from which I'm getting my information, but it would be interesting to know if the committee had that scheme in mind when planning this. Whether it was intended to connect up. At the time, it would have made sense for the Circle Line to connect with Route 7, whatever the plan was. In those days, a lot of freight came through the city, the docklands were at their peak, and boats and barges were coming right into the city. There was a lot more industry in central London than there is today. Freight was as important to the railways as passengers. Even the Underground carried goods trains. While Route 7 is a dedicated freight line, the plan talks about freight travelling over the other routes as well. So at the time, provision for goods traffic would have been an essential consideration. In fact, the plan specifies routes 6 and 7 as first priority to be constructed. But in the long run, it seems likely to me that the line would very quickly have become a white elephant, if there were ever circumstances under which it would have been completed. Let's look at the time scale. The plan set out a period of 30 years for all the works to be completed. Now obviously this would have been staggered, they wouldn't have been working on all the lines at once. Route 7 was in the top priority category. How long it would have taken to build, I don't know. The Victoria Line, which received the go-ahead in 1962, took 6 years to build, though it had had many years of planning beforehand. So I doubt Route 7 would have been completed much before 1960, if we're being optimistic. During that time, London was changing, industry was moving out, goods traffic was increasingly going by road. The docks would soon prove inadequate for large container ships, resulting in shipping moving downstream to Tilbury. 1955 would see the publication of the Modernisation Plan, which would recommend the total restructuring of freight handling on British railways. That restructuring would also quickly become obsolete, but that's another story. In other words, by the time Route 7 would have been completed, it would have been irrelevant. If not on opening, then within a few years. Good thing they didn't build it, really, isn't it? These days, freight tends to avoid central London altogether, instead using lines like the West London and North London lines. Intensive passenger services would make freight trains difficult to timetable through the centre, even if it offered any significant advantage. What we got instead was the Thameslink core, which follows the same route above ground, reuses the Snow Hill Tunnel, and joins the old city-widened lines. So that's what became of Route 7. from intensive freight to no freight at all. Hello all, I hope you enjoyed this septenary tale from the tube. If so, I'd be much obliged if you would click that like button down there and perhaps consider subscribing and hitting the bell button to be kept up to date on this channel. As always, I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon. You are the goods trains to my pre-war central London. And I'll see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube.